I know the Steam controller originally was super, super cool, and something that got pushed around a lot when the Steam controller came out was
Yeah.
Civ, because you could play games like Civ on your TV, which was previously not really a thing unless you had one of those couch commander setups that no one owns. So it like wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
Um, how are the ergonomics in general? And I have a lot of questions here,
Hmm.
but I'm going to start with
Okay.
did you try just using the touchpads? Because that looked like a thumbs way down position for me. Did you try just using the
I
touchpads for an
did.
extended period of time? Okay.
So the touchpads, in my opinion, the touchpads are on there because Valve believes that they enable gaming experiences that are simply not practical with a joystick or a D-pad configuration. Because they're touch sensitive and you can use them as trackpads, because they've got this advanced haptic feedback built into them, the touchpads are they're there for a reason. There's games you're not going to want to play with a joystick, like an RTS, for example, just like on the original Steam controller. But in my opinion, the touchpads are were second class citizens when it came to ergonomics.
Seemed like it. Yeah.
That was how I felt, even though I have smaller hands. Therefore, compared to someone whose thumbs come over more to kind of get in here and access something. For me, it's a relatively small motion, but it was less comfortable to use the touchpads than it was to use either the joystick or the D-pad. Now, related to that question, both the joystick and the D-pad, this is something that almost no controllers do well. Pretty much every controller out there is primarily a joystick controller or primarily a D-pad
Or
controller.
yeah.
And also there's that other thing bolted onto it, right? We've all experienced it, and there's ones that try to be both. There's that modular Thrustmaster one, for example, where you can actually switch the places. But the thing is, even if you could move them, physically move them around on the controller, the reality of it is the contours are designed for your thumb to hover above, like where a thumbstick would be,
Or
or
for it
to
to be
sit
low. Yeah.
flat, like where a D-pad would be. It's not the same. It's just not the same. I think the Steam Deck is the closest that I've seen to something that is perfectly balanced for both. So
Awesome.
whether you want to play SNES games and use the D-pad exclusively, or you want to play PlayStation games, PC games, games that are more joystick optimized, you will be, in my opinion, at least 99% comfortable. Neither
And
of them interferes with the other at all.
speaking of the triggers and the
Mm-hmm.
joysticks and the D-pad, effectively all of that stuff. We know their touchpads are like pretty good. Okay, whatever, they're tuning in the haptics, whatever. But we
Yes.
saw they're pretty good with the Steam controller. Joysticks, triggers, D-pads, really hard to get right. What are your comments on those?
Okay, I like the D-pad. It's solid. You know me, I'm pretty picky about D-pads. It's not a super clicky D-pad, but it manages to not feel mushy. It really does remind me of just a good, simple, classic D-pad like you'd have on the SNES, for example.
Okay, awesome.
The buttons, hard to evaluate because I'm trying to think what the B button is kind of hanging off the edge. So A, X, and Y
Mm,
all felt pretty good, not super clicky. Like I remember Razer did a controller a number of years ago that
yeah,
had these
mechanical.
hyper clicky,
Yeah,
like they felt like a mouse switch under them. So they're not clicky like that, but they're fine. I would describe them as fine. The one that hangs off the edge, they've got some tuning to do because right now it feels and sounds markedly different from the other three, but they're aware of that. That's something that they're working on. The joysticks felt excellent. I know one of the big
ooh,
concerns about this product is joystick drift. Now,
yeah.
obviously, that's something I can't evaluate in this
No.
curated, supervised experience with these brand new devices. Right? They haven't been worn out yet. But what I noticed is that the joysticks are not a mobile style joystick. So when you look at the profile shots where I hold up the Aya Neo and the Steam Deck kind of one on top of the other like this, the Steam Deck is about double the profile, and part of that is the ergo grips for the bottoms of your hands, and part of that is the much higher profile, more desktop profile joysticks. So the A Neo has more of like a low profile kind of mobile joystick, not nearly as bad as the which one was the 3DS one where you slid the joystick around, 3DS XL or something like that. Can't remember. One of those anyway.
Yeah.
Not as bad as that, but very
The
similar.
C-Stick or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, very similar to what you'd find on a Nintendo Switch. None of them. I think Valve has some tuning to do in terms of like mixing. So the acceleration curve on joystick movement, I wouldn't mind seeing that adjusted a little bit. It felt a little bit different to me, but I also don't have a ton of experience playing games with a joystick, so it could just be something that I was imagining. The hardware though, the hardware felt good, and I'm pretty confident in the hardware right now.
Cool. Okay. More things. Ed had an interesting comment about like hand meat and it touching the touchpad. I know you said you'd have to try to make that happen.
Oh, not a
But
problem, in my opinion.
Really? Even for like monster hand, like bigger than me hand people?
In my opinion, not a problem. Because it's the angle that your hand's coming in. Because like here, I'll change my angle a little bit. Like you're holding it like this, right? So the bigger your hands are, the more you're going to kind of curl around it. But that's still going to leave that gap there. You're never going to touch that touchpad. I don't see that as a potential problem at all.
Okay. I just wanted to like super clarify on that.